It's amazing to see how some people can turn a hobby they're passionate about into a means of making a living. Well, many years ago, a Lawrenceburg man who loved to fish started a successful business making lures. Rob Wiles went to Lawrenceburg to discover how that passion and business have been passed along.
I'm going to have to update this page here.
You often find Linda and Charlie Brewer at the computer because that's where you spend a lot of time when you're running an internationally known business. But if you ask Charlie, he'd answer just like the famous bumper sticker, "I'd rather be fishing." You might say it's in Charlie's blood, since his dad, Charlie Sr., loved to fish and loved to take his boy with him when he went.
When I was growing up, we fished all the lakes and ponds and whatever, but and I grew up fishing with him. He had an old wooden boat with oars in it. You didn't have trolling motors back then. So we'd go to the lakes and Pickwick Lake and Kentucky Lake and we'd fish.
Slider fishing is not a rock'em sock'em method at all. It's a slow, easy way of doing things.
Charlie Sr. was such a good fisherman that he made how-to tapes for wannabe fishermen and women and developed his own fishing gear and a system to use it. Next thing you know, the Slider Fishing Company was born.
He was always looking for a better and better way to catch fish. And as more people started coming on the lakes, it was getting a little tougher and tougher. But I can remember him and his buddies sitting in the backyard, just whittling out lures, taking wood and actually whittling out lures, and then they'd put hair on them, whatever, they'd take that off a dog or whatever, and make all kinds of homemade lures, trying to find a better way to fish. And sometime in the 1960s, he read somewhere about people that are using rubber worms or plastic worms. It was kind of a new thing. So I remember him buying some kit through the mail to make these rubber worms, and you do it on the kitchen stove. So he'd put this thing in a pot and he'd melt it and he'd pour these worms, And fishing these out on the lake, he started catching more and more fish. So through the 1960s, he started going more and more to that, and he gradually worked the size down smaller and smaller and smaller to basically a 4-inch plastic worm, and with just a single head, flat head, and that was a slider worm and slider head, and he developed a technique where fishing, he went from heavy tackle fishing to light line fishing. The whole company was built off not just a lure, but a system and a technique to go with it.
Charlie Brewer's crappie slider has been a proven winner for over 20 years.
As techniques caught on, the company grew. And it wasn't so long before slider lures were talked about by fishermen from Nashville to Nagasaki. Charlie Sr. loved running his business, but let's face it, he loved fishing even more. So eventually, he turned the running of slider lure over to Charlie Jr. and his wife, Linda, who, not surprisingly, shares the family's love of fishing.
I love to look at nature and the animals and just the water, so relaxing, and being away from the telephones, and it's just very pleasant and peaceful to me.
Charlie Sr. passed away years ago, but the company is still about finesse fishing.
He was always out to catch fish first and not catch the fishermen. Of course, he may catch a few fishermen to stay in business, but his main goal was to catch fish. That's still our goal today.
You might think being around fishing and fishermen and fisherwomen and fishing stuff every day would make Charlie Jr. a bit less anxious to get out onto the lake himself, but not so. Maybe because of those long ago days with his dad.
We'd go out there, all day long. We'd go, if it's wintertime, we'd get out there almost daylight, stay to dark. It didn't matter if we caught a fish or not. We were there for the whole day. And sometimes we caught a lot and sometimes we didn't. But it is enjoyable being out there with him. And sometimes even my granddad would go with us. So you had 3 generations out on the water. Just getting out on the lake, even by yourself, is enjoyable, getting out to nature, and it's relaxing. And then out there with your fishing buddy, you get out there and talk. You don't catch fish all the time. There are times when I've been out there when I don't catch anything, not even had a bite. And then there's other days that have been fairly good. And then there's some days, occasionally, where you got a fantastic day. And you'll remember that day for the rest of your life. And you keep going back hoping to get one of those super good days, you know.
Those super good days may not even include catching any fish yourself. Charlie has some pointers on what to do when taking a grandson or granddaughter along.
Always make sure they catch more than you. You know, if you're fishing along and you make sure when the count's done they got a few more than you, and they'll brag about how they beat their granddad or their dad or whatever, and they'll love it.
Just like people of all ages who love fishing have a soft spot in their hearts for Charlie's place in Lawrenceburg, the Slider Fishing Company.